Hello, everybody. I'm Matthew Orr from Wet Ink Games. We're here for another Wednesday, Wet Ink Wednesday, and I'm joined this time by Sarah M.W. Miller, a dark artist and creative writer.
Hi
And
there.
yeah, and we're going to talk about, psychic kids and being a nerd and doing art and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, my favorite kind of conversations.
So just really to start in, like we were talking just before we got recorded, like I saw your art at Origins, which is a gaming convention.
Uh-huh.
And so is that sort of like what's your kind of home nerddom? Like, are you a board game person? I was looking
What
into your
kind of nerd am
website.
I?
I saw some anime fan art on your website.
hmm
Like what kind of nerdy things are you into?
So I guess there's a few things that come to mind. I'm definitely a big gaming nerd, which includes video games and tabletop RPGs. Big into dark fantasy, Tolkien, anime. I'm also a pretty big nerd for psychology and philosophy, which I think counts because a lot of books, games, movies, or shows that like delve deep into the mind have always been ones to catch
Mm.
my attention. So yeah, I dabble in my nerddoms.
All right, great. And I saw I mean this is sort of the one that I was looking at your fan art before we got started to see what other kind of things you went into, talking about the psychic his not psychic the social histories and stuff like that. The characters goes deep
Mhm.
into the psychology and stuff like that. I saw you have two pieces from the Netflix Umbrella Academy show
Yeah, yeah.
in there in the mix, and that's the show that I've enjoyed a whole lot. And so I'm like, where are the rest of them? You got to have the other five, like,
Yeah.
but
Speaking of which, actually five is the one I'm working on next. It's been a slow series whenever I get fan art time, but I love that series. Five is definitely next character I'll be tackling.
yeah, because that one, especially, I don't know if you read the comic, but like the show goes more into that like
hmm
psychology and family dynamics and stuff like that. The comic is quite silly, but the show is a little also silly, but somewhat more serious. Anyway,
It's fun,
uh,
silly. Yeah, no, I really love the show, and I caught a bit of the comic, but the show is definitely what drew me in. Like some of the characters, especially. It's a really fun story and universe, and it's always cool to meet other people who like also like it. I hang them up with my art display, and every now and then, like Umbrella Academy, I'm just like, yeah,
yeah,
it's a good show.
it is. It's I the first season especially was made apparently for me. I guess other people liked it as well, but great. But it was
hmm
definitely made for me. So having not to not get too far off talking about that, but like so comics, like I said, you've got anime on your anime fan arts on your thing. You've got a lot of like um, uh, you talked about dark artists. Like, what does that mean? What kind of influences do you pull into your art, like the art side of it? And then we'll talk about gaming next. But like, you know, did you go to art school? Are you self educated? Like all that kind of stuff. Like what are your some of your influences from the arts that are out there?
Okay, yeah. So I have a couple different, I guess, pieces of that answer. The first, my biggest influence is probably music. I've been sort of like as a hobbyist, a musician my whole life, like music, piano, things like that. But I have songs playing at almost all times when I'm creating, whether it be like favorite bands or just instrumentals for atmosphere. It really helps me get in like the right mind space for creating like mood for a piece. A lot of my tastes are kind of diverse, but like a lot of metal, psychedelic, doom, indie rock, some electronic. Uh, but yeah, music is a huge part of my creative process and has always inspired me like throughout whenever I've been creating every decade. But apart from music, growing up, one of the biggest influences was definitely Tolkien for sure. That really introduced me into like fantasy, and I'd argue like dark fantasy as a teenager. And from there, it was discovering games like Fable, Elder Scrolls, Dragon Age, games that explored this idea of like moral consequence. and to me really elevated the like player character experience and gave you choices and like unique outcomes. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. So as a, I did go to art school. In college, I was super compelled by the Renaissance painters, neoclassical, Baroque, which there's like a lot of dark commentary in that,
Yeah,
for sure.
that's all the chiaroscuro that
Yeah.
David is all about the chiaroscuro and you know
Hmm. Yeah, and so
uh,
I'd say that a mix of that, between art school and just my gaming interests, like I said, the games with that sort of character depth, that really it set the bar for me early on. So I crave like a certain level of depth in my media. So my biggest influences have always sort of been driving me in that direction. Oh, I'm also a big fan of horror and mystery, psychological horror especially. So I think all of those roots and sources of inspiration sort of played a part in my development as an artist and creator, and kind of helped me hone my own unique artistic voice and got me into sort of dark art, dark surrealism, like exploring the
yeah.
mind and what makes us who we are.
Yeah, dark surrealism. I can really get behind that as a term. Like that's I that one of those pieces has like it's got sort of the skeletal form and there's sort of like a
Mhm.
red shroud and it's like is it the face of the being that is the
Yes.
skeleton or is it like a blood? I don't know. It's like it your art invites those sort of like oh well those are some creepy things that I think about the meanings, right?
Yeah, yeah. I always tell people the intent isn't like to necessarily scare people because I know some families with kids at cons will be like, oh, careful. But it's not meant to be horrific as it is meant to like encourage people to think. Because yeah, there's like the imagery of skulls and some motifs of death and stuff, but more than that, it's usually like poking at symbolism or iconography that, might hit a certain chord psychologically with like different viewers, and that's usually my aim. Lots of skulls for sure, though.
Well, right, but like Skull is like that's the classic memento mori, right? Like that's
Right?
the you got to contemplate your own time in this
Hmm.
form on this planet and all that kind of stuff. Like
Yeah, your time, your space, your effect on people. It's there's so much to be explored there, and it's always nice to meet other people who like to think along those similar veins of thought, which is probably why you were drawn to the art in the first place. Which here we are.
yeah, we definitely we're going to talk about that next. And having mentioned it now a second time, like yeah, we saw your work at Origins, and so obviously you've got uh, you're you're always going to shows. It seems not always, but like you've got a, a cycle of shows that you go to. Like you go to the cons.
Yeah.
What other shows other than you Origins, what's your kind of big shows that you go to? Do you go to a lot of those gaming cons? Are there other cons that you go to? Like are there art shows that you do? Like I don't know, what's that con life like for you?
uh con life is very special. It's busy and it's chaos. It's definitely nothing like any other job I've ever had. Before this I was like delivering pizza, but I do this full time now. I pretty much run what they tend to call the con circuit, like month to month. Sometimes it's one show, sometimes it's four shows in a month. And really it's so hard to explain to like family friends who've never been to one because they think like, oh, you what's a con like? What is like the atmosphere like? And it's hard to describe it, but there's because of all the things that go into it, there's this like really it's like chaos, yes, but it's also like this deep sense of community with other artists and vendors.
Hmm.
Like we're some of the few constants in the chaos of it, like constant travel, constant like restocking and planning and like loading docking in and out hotels and flying, and it's a lot, but like you have people you're sharing this space with, and not just artists but the fans and attendees. It's like it's exhausting some days, but I really love it. It's seeing new people, talking about my work, sharing art with other people, meeting other artists, knowing we're all nerds here in this space to like share in like art, characters, games that inspire us. It's really special. There's nothing quite like it, and I'm really glad that this is what I get to do for a living. But as far as specific shows, I always try to hit the big ones. I'm an East Coast artist, so Dragon Con, New York Comic Con, Otakon, anything that's semi-local to the DC area is always a plus. But I travel all over the US. I also do a couple tattoo and oddity shows. I've given those a try. So normally it's like Comic Cons and anime conventions, but every now and then a handful of like, you know, the bizarre and the dark. So my art definitely has a place there.
One of the other artists I know is at a like a cryptid festival, a cryptid themed
Oh, that's
festival this
fun.
weekend. So, anything, ever done anything like that?
I'd love to try. I'm always on the lookout for new shows. You know, it's the application process is kind of standard for like the Comic Cons, but then there'll be these hidden things like that. I hadn't heard about the cryptid show, but now I'm like, oh, I gotta look into that.
Yeah, they're like, because almost so many of those cryptids are like this one. It was seen in 1973 in this tiny Ohio town, and now they have a festival there every year. And so yeah, I don't.
Oh yeah.
There's
I mean actually last summer we actually went on a little cryptid tour. One of my siblings is big into cryptids and Mothman, so we were like, hey, we're not far from Point Pleasant. Let's take a road trip. We'll hit up like haunted sites and we'll look for Flatwoods Monster. We made a whole road trip out of it. It was a good time. So
um,
definitely would love to check out the Cryptid Con.
well, I think there's definitely one in Point Pleasant at some point,
Mhm.
uh, for sure. The one that I think is, I don't know where, it's some sort of Frogman festival. I saw it on the, which I think is the Loveland Frogman. I don't know,
Mhm.
in Ohio. Anyway, I'm really apparently distracted. By from my question list. So thank you for
That's
talking
right.
about that. So you talked about how you'd like to talk to artists about your work. So again, that's where we saw your work, your particularly your Spectrum series. We were shopping around for an artist who could give us some portraits of psychic children and sort of like the duality of that thing. Like they're a kid, and this is maybe like a school portrait almost, but then there's this something else about them which is displayed in the picture that um, indicates that they have this extra control over the world. And
Mhm.
that sort of layering of the symbolism is something you were kind of working with with the Spectrum series. And so that was like, oh, this is interesting. Let's talk to this artist. So can you, I'm sure you've got a pitch ready. Can you tell us about that particular series of paintings and what you were doing with that and what it means to you? Or
Yeah, yeah. The Spectrum pieces, right? So the I always think I have a pitch ready at every con, but it changes from place to place. But Spectrum is it's a series of paintings that I've done over the past several years that explores disorder, mental health, and what it's like living with certain conditions and the struggles that come with them. So on a deeper level, though, it's kind of about shedding light on dark sides of the mind that some of us aren't sure how to talk about in a more like understated, safe, like art's like kind of like a visual conversation. So uh, um, I don't know if I've mentioned, but a big thing that always like kind of influences the work, especially like all my original work, is I have autism and ADHD, and by extension, some comorbid conditions that have given me a kind of unique perspective on things throughout my life, unique experiences that I learned how to capture visually when I probably didn't have another outlet. So at first, these paintings were honestly more of like a raw exploration of those experiences, and I wasn't sure how other people would interpret them or accept them. I just kind of painted things that I was feeling. But then I started getting the courage to like show it at my booth. I started doing cons in 2018, and I think the Spectrum series was around then, like 2018, 2019. I started being like, I'm gonna draw what I want to draw. I want to draw spooky stuff and deep, meaningful things. And but people really they connected with it. They really liked it. And so these people I was meeting at cons, they would or whether at shows or online, these people would like reach out to me, and some of them seemed to really connect with a certain piece, and would come up to my table sometimes with like tears in their eyes and say, uh, I've never been able to express what this feels like to live with, but this captures it, or I've never felt so seen before. Some people, even some of the more abstract spooky ones, they'll say, oh my gosh, this looks exactly like my sleep paralysis demon. And that always gets a laugh out of me. Um, but no, I just realized that there's always been this sort of dissonance or like this gap in communication I was never able to bridge with words, but
Mm.
I was suddenly doing it with my art, and together, me and the viewer, were kind of reaching each other and having a conversation in a visual language and sharing words maybe neither of us could find before. And I guess because of that, feeling a little bit less alone with who we are and the things that we experience. So that was the goal behind the series: is paint raw emotion and experience and help other people out there find their own voice in it. And yeah, it's kind of cool how art connects us in ways that words can't.
Yeah, that I think it I mean, obviously I mean, I'm not like a brain expert or anything like that, but I think it goes through different pathways, right? I mean, it's like it doesn't go through the language center when you see something, so you don't need words. You just it goes right. It it gets in a different way, I guess.
Yeah, we kind of bypass that like thing that we're always worried about when we're talking to people face to face, like, oh, am I reading these social cues right? Am I explaining this the right way? But sometimes it's just like the right piece of art or the right piece of music. It just like hits us and we're like, oh my gosh, there it is. That's the thought. I can never put it to words, but there it is.
Right, right.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's almost silly to ask you about like uh after such a serious and important answer, like it's almost silly I feel silly asking you about like, so we asked you to draw some like illustrations for our silly little dice rolling game.
No,
Um,
it's cool. I
but
love the whole
you know,
premise.
that that kind of I think the evocative nature of what you were doing with that series was like, yes, we want an artist who can bring that into these portraits of the psychic kids. And
Hmm.
so I think I explained it in a couple different ways, but I think like my initial idea was like, okay, what if they're like Byzantine style icons with like gold backgrounds and stuff and all this weird sort of like not reality that kind of those icons capture, except it's about psychic powers.
Uh-huh.
And then I said, and mix in like a little bit of the uncomfortable kid stuff because you're playing like the preteen kids. And
Everyone's favorite time in their life.
oh, sure, it's just like there's so many there's so much about that time which you can't help but be awkward. And
Yeah.
so to capture sort of like the weird smiles or the like I don't really belong here kind of feelings that are
Hmm.
so prevalent at that time, except again because you have psychic powers and you're like seeing things that other people aren't seeing, or you can do things that other people aren't doing. So I I thought you would be a good artist to do that based on seeing your work, and then I think
Thank
the
you.
work that you've delivered is exceeds expectations as far as meeting
Oh,
all of those briefs.
that's always
So
happy for an artist to hear. So thank you. I'm so glad.
so I'd love to hear a little bit more about like how you actually did this particular group of portraits of psychic kids and incorporated some of the ideas that I had about like the psychic powers would be represented by like sciency kind of things. And
Hmm.
you again, you did it well. So please tell me a little bit about you know what you did there with
Creative
the
process.
process. Yeah, I'd love to hear.
Well, first
Like,
of all, like the project itself and the way that you pitched it, like with the art direction, I was like, this is cool because I loved your take on it, like how you had like the classic art examples with the portraits. I know we talked about like the uncomfortable teen expressions with the Diego Velázquez paintings,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I was like, okay. And the Byzantine art is like, this is drawing from some really cool ideas. And you always see in fantasy art like magic spells and stuff, but your the way you pitched it, it was like we're trying to reimagine how to portray this like these powers in a way that doesn't just feel like someone's like casting a spell, but more like it's almost scientific. And I was really intrigued by it from the start. But I think I began with the school portrait angle because character art, it starts with the character. So who are these kids beneath their powers? They obviously like are who they are also because of their powers, but like where did they come from? Like what are their origins and their personalities? How did they dress? So I wanted to I really try representation is really important to me. So I tried to explore like a variety of looks while keeping to that like neutral, serene expression vibe that you said, you were going for, like yearbook photos almost. And once I had the feel for the characters, I got to play around with those magic powers, and that was one of my favorite parts of the project. Was like it almost reminded me of like when you open science or chemistry books and you see how they illustrate like what a molecule looks like, and so I got to play around with visually representing powers like telepathy, zoopathy, but not overly obvious. Instead, I'm like, how can we make this look a little bit more like a diagram, like hit somewhere between boring science book, but way more like fantasy overlay. And so that's where some of the Byzantine art and scientific illustrations kind of both played a part in like how I wanted to illustrate the different abilities. And then of course using the tarot card motifs was sort of like the overall framing presentation, and that's sort of the order I worked it in, was like character first, power like overlay, and then a cool frame to like wrap it all together.
Yeah, it like I said, it as we got to see them as they came in, it was like, oh yes, yes, this is happening the way that I imagined. The I really love the choices, the emotion. I think it's empathiokinesis, I think is the name that we use for it, but that's the one that's got the molecules. And so
Mhm.
I'm sure it's like, oh, of course, it's like she's controlling chemicals in the brain that makes you feel certain things, like
Yeah, and for
um
that I was studying, or I tried to like look at molecule structure of like dopamine really specifically. So it's like little things like that that might not be apparent. Someone might say, "Oh, molecules," but then like, "Oh, that's like the dopamine or whatever pattern of." And then with I was happy anytime I of course got to use like some of my motifs are always come back to like we said skulls and stuff, but Soma can use
mhm.
like moving the body and having that sort of like skull fade, or the zoopathy with like the wolf jawbone and the crow skull to almost represent different types of animal thought or communication. I got to have like it was like a playground playing with this project.
Well, it I think it all came together wonderfully, and I can't wait to see it. We're working on layout right now, so like we're starting
Mhm.
to see them in the book in context, and it's coming together really great. So
That's awesome.
you'll I mean the it'll I can't wait for it to be finished and out there and people see it and
Absolutely. I can't
go
wait to
through
see it
that.
like physically. That's going to be super exciting.
Right. That's sort of the big excitement of the finished product, right? It
Mhm.
all the work goes in and then you get to see it, and and hopefully the people at the cons, like we'll talk to them about it and hopefully they'll like it too.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Right, before you guys ever approached the booth or with like the job, um, with the commission idea, it was my husband and I. We were a big fan of Never Going Home and some of the like RPGs and gaming stuff before. So like once we connected, I was like, oh, this is cool. This is gonna be fun. We're gonna make something cool together. That's exciting.
I think we have. I think we have. Um, so I think I meant to ask you what's your favorite role playing game, but you mentioned liking some you like just now. What is your favorite role playing game? I mean, is it too obvious? I'm going to stereotype you a little and guess that at some point in your life, Vampire the Masquerade was a favorite. Is it
I
is it still is it what would you say is your favorite sort of like current game you're really excited about?
That's this is a fun question. At one point, I did play Vampire the Masquerade. We played like a quick campaign with someone before they moved away. My favorite though is probably Call of Cthulhu. Um, no surprise, Lovecraftian horror. That's really cool. But also, I really enjoy their D100 system. I also really like, let's see, Tales from the Loop and Morkborg. I really like unique story-driven RPGs with like unique settings and uh, uh, I guess universes to play in. I also
Yeah.
tend toward like rules light or rules medium. Like I prefer to kind of focus more on the universe and the role play aspect rather than get into like min maxing and rules lawyering and stuff that just like disrupts the game flow. But we play all sorts. We have like a bookcase downstairs that's just like at least 2 to 3 shelves lined with so
Well,
many books we've kickstarted and collected. And right now I'm teaching myself the One Ring, the new system to
yeah.
run a campaign for that. And my husband's currently got us going through Rime of the Frost Maiden in D&D. So we play around, but I'd say Call of Cthulhu gets the trophy for that question.
Awesome. Awesome. So what are you what might you be working on next? Like, are you I know it's always hard to finish one thing and then you've already started the next thing. What kind of what things might con season, the heart of con season is a couple months away. What's going to be new at your table?
Mm-hmm.
Do you got any other, I mean, you don't like, I don't know, do you do murals? Like what's happening in your that you're excited about that's coming soon?
Well, it's definitely true that there's a lot. I have so many ideas and only so much of like me and my art time to like make them happen. But I've got a lot of projects on different burners right now. But con season, like you mentioned, it does take my focus away from that. So some of these have had like a lot of time to come together. But the one I'm probably most excited about is I'm working on my own web comic called Crow and Arrow, and right now it's only available on Patreon. But I'm sort of making like a creative process, like page to page, month to month. People get to see it come together. But by the time part one's ready, I'll probably be hosting that on my website and maybe in a couple other places. But webcomic is definitely in the works and something I'm currently working on. I'm also putting together my first art book, which is going to be sort of like a collection of everything literally for the past decade because I wanted to kind of get a good sense of direction over the past few years with where the art was going before I started like cataloging it. But it's been really fun to kind of graphically design that bit by bit. And the Spectrum series, now that that's sort of reaching a conclusion, I'm going to be turning that into an Oracle deck, which I've been telling people about at my booth at different shows. So webcomic, art book,
Yeah,
Oracle deck, lots of
that's
world building too, because the comic is going to probably branch into several stories. I have, like I said, probably years worth of project and content, and it's more about like channeling, like, okay, Sarah, what can we realistically do this
right,
year
right.
between shows and with everything going on? So we all, little steps, but
Sure. I mean that's plenty to be keeping you busy plus your regular schedule too. So wow, that's
and I can't, I guess I can't not mention when we were talking about RPGs, back in 2009, my husband and I, when we were working our pizza delivery jobs, we said we need an escape, so we're going to make our own RPG. And so we have actually been slowly working on our own tabletop RPG. I wouldn't say we've been working on it steadily over since 2009. It's been more like a slow burn labor of love together that we work on outside of our jobs. And once it's ready, I'm super excited to publish that and share it with the world as well.
all right. Well, that's cool. You heard it here, maybe not here first, but like you heard it here, people watching for Game Channel stuff.
Mhm.
Awesome. So, Sarah, if anyone wants to join your Patreon or find your booth schedule or commission you for art or whatever, or buy your art, what are the places on the internet where people can see your work, find out more about you, and maybe hear more about these projects that you were just telling us about?
Yeah, so best place, first and foremost, is going to be my website, sarahmillercreations.com, Sarah with an H. But it's that's like kind of my hub. I try to update it every now and then, but I have, a tab with my shows schedule. So that's, all the upcoming places I'm going to be traveling. There's links there to my Patreon. So if people are interested in the webcomic and they want to learn more about it, that can take them there. And yeah, I'd say the website's the best resource to send people to. And if on social media you want to hear about or just like catch some of the casual stuff I post, sketches and things like that. It's at Sarah Miller Creations on Instagram, Facebook, wherever I happen to be.
All right. Well, those will be in the video description. So anyone that wants
Thanks
to
very much.
uh, click through from there, you can learn more about Sarah. Sarah, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for sharing so much about your art and stuff. I think it's been really cool to hear from you. And
Of course, thank you so much for having me. It's a lot of fun to talk about. I mean, everyone loves talking about the things that inspire them and nerd stuff they're into. So yeah,
sure.
it's been fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see you on the con circuit.
Yes, I'll see you around, probably at Origins or wherever, and hope maybe we'll be selling games together side by side one day.
It'll be fun.
Yep.